Hello, and welcome to the Cultivating Confidence podcast. I am your host, Dr. Nicole Grams. I am a life coach who specializes in anxiety, health, and human design. And I also happen to be a functional medicine pharmacist. This podcast is a compilation of conversations that I've had with clients and colleagues. So listen in as we explore the mind, body, and soul's confidence in its many forms. So today we are talking about giving yourself permission. And what that means to me, you'll soon find out. But most of us start out in life in a position where we have to seek permission from parents or guardians or teachers or even just like older kids, babysitters, to do like literally anything, right? And that makes sense because kids have lots of dreams and ideas and fantasies and not so much the desire to preserve their own lives. But kids don't really know how to exist in the world. So they need guidance. And as a kid, if you're brave enough to ask for it, being granted permission is exhilarating and fun and exciting. And you get to do something and you kind of feel like you're getting away with something, even though you asked permission, right? And that's all good. But many of us as kids learned that permission is not necessarily granted for anything we want. And a lot of things that we do want, like even if they don't cost anything and didn't hurt anyone or didn't have any sort of negative effect, like it was just, oh, that's weird or that's, whatever. And we are shamed or belittled for wanting some of the things that our tiny little brains were able to dream up, right? We learn that judgment from others is something that we should fear and that we should really pay attention to. And, you know, we learn not to trust our own opinions. We learn not to trust our own judgment. We learn not to trust our own emotions most of the time and to rely on everybody else to make the judgment calls or for us, right? We start to put ourselves in boxes and then we start to behave as we're expected to and based on those boxes, starting as kids. And as we grow, you can kind of see where this is going. So for a long time in my own life, I went about my business existing in these boxes that I put myself in or let other people put me in. And I just happily stayed there, right? Whether that was being a pharmacist, a manager, a wife, a traveler, like basically any identifying factor is a box that you've either put yourself in or others have put you in. And those aren't always bad things to have, right? But the boxes that I was in, it was basically a habit. It was comfortable and I didn't have to think about what I needed to do or how I should behave. And it was pretty easy to follow the guidelines set by these boxes, right? And as life went on, I grew more and more uncomfortable with these boxes, although I kind of just shut up and let it happen because what else am I going to do, right? I I did my very best to cover up and like suppress all of the negative emotions that were kind of bubbling up that were on a low rumble because on paper I had a pretty amazing life, right? I had reached the goals that I had set for myself in 10th grade. I decided I wanted to be a pharmacist in 10th grade and I went straight, fast tracked myself to get to that goal. I had this stable career that I had spent my life working up to and pursuing. And I had a partner who loves me and we had a home of our own. I had my cat. I traveled in some, but for me, ultimately being in those spaces without really knowing myself, the appeal started to wear off. And I was stagnant, and the happiness that I thought I was supposed to feel with having all of these things around me in my life just wasn't there. Right. So I was convinced that there was nothing that I could do because I couldn't possibly find another job, even within the pharmacy world, because I don't know the right people. I didn't believe I had the skills for a different setting. I was like absolutely convinced that I was stuck with what I had for the rest of my life because that's how I planned it. And I hadn't planned for anything that wouldn't work out exactly as I thought it would. Right. Like I planned to be here. And also, this would cause happiness in my life. Like maybe I could paint a little bit more or find a new hobby or travel more, but like the basics were not going to change. I was stuck with the foundation that I had built, right? And I didn't let myself dream any bigger than that because I didn't think it was realistic. And realistic to me meant safe. And realistic meant that I couldn't rely on myself to make a decision until after I had crowdsourced everybody else's opinions, whether that was friends or family or, social media, random people on the internet, their blogs, what they thought of things. And the only decisions that I felt confident with were the ones that basically had a seal of approval from somebody who was not me. So, as you can imagine, that gets old. And I reached a breaking point in the discomfort of my own life. And this is where so many people find themselves before they will make any meaningful changes in their life, because we are all content with floating along and letting it being easy. And there's nothing wrong with that unless you want to change, right? Unless you start feeling the discomfort of the limits that you've set for yourself. But I just started to get so uncomfortable and I couldn't figure out why, because like I said, everything on paper was great. And for the people that I talk with, like typically nothing is quote unquote wrong with their life on paper. But then, if nothing's wrong with the life that you have built up around you, you might turn it in on yourself. And I definitely did that at first. I started blaming myself for my own unhappiness because like I just wasn't appreciating hard enough. And little did I know I was right in that, but in a completely opposite way from what I thought. It was, there's just a lot of back and forth in my head about what was going on. I started blaming my partner, and let me tell you, he had a lot of fun with that, right? I started lashing out at him pretty frequently. He had some strong opinions on that and how I was behaving. My anxiety was also sky high because I felt very out of control. And the thing is, like, I was kind of out of control because I didn't have control of my life. I was relying on everybody else's opinions to make those decisions for me. I didn't give myself permission to live the way I wanted to live. So I gave my power over to everyone else whose opinions I sought out before making decisions about my own life. And that breaking point felt awful because I didn't know what was on the other side of something I had never even let myself imagine. Right. So at that point, I had learned about functional medicine a little bit. I wanted to start a business. I was freaking terrified and I knew I couldn't do it alone. So I hired a business coach. And through working with this coach, I had many, 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 many revelations about how self-critical I was and how sneaky that self-criticism is and how little I actually trusted myself at the beginning. And as you can imagine, this also felt awful to realize. And but like, at least it was a productive sort of awful and not just the like, I'm stuck here forever. And this is a familiar sort of awful. It was like new and productive, right? So as I learned how to trust myself more, I started learning how to give myself permission. And the first thing I gave myself permission to do was dream. The first time I was asked to picture my future beyond my wildest dreams, like literally, I was just told blank canvas, tell me what your life looks like if it turns out to be, beyond your wildest dreams. And I basically gave myself a slight pay raise and less anxiety. Like not none, not no anxiety, just less anxiety, right? And at the same time, when I saw other people doing this sort of exercise about dreaming about what their futures could be, I thought they could do whatever they put their mind to, but not me. No, absolutely not me, because I was extra special broken and I needed to be realistic about my life. And dreaming was just a way to be disappointed in myself before I ever even got there. Right. So, needless to say, it was pointed out to me that my being realistic, quote unquote, was kind of getting in the way of literally having a few thoughts about what life could potentially be like in a fantasy world, right? So I gave it another try. And this time I gave myself permission to let my mind run wild. And this was also terrifying. And I got excited, but I could feel a lot of resistance to even putting into words what my brain could come up with. Like I had these fleeting thoughts of like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if, but then like there was a filter that my mouth just couldn't say those things because then that would make them real and then I could be criticized for them, right? But as soon as I started letting myself speak, it got really fun because the people I was around were holding space for me to just dream these wild dreams. And all of a sudden, I went from a slight pay raise to starting my own business and helping thousands of people feel better in their bodies and feel better about themselves and make a couple $1 million a year and fund a cat sanctuary and have a few places to call home, scattered throughout the globe, to make the 6 months of travel I have every year easier, right? So I let myself really go crazy and I let myself feel what it might actually feel like to be that person, right? You step into those shoes, you imagine yourself in this place, and you think about what it feels like to be there. And that's how I learned what confidence felt like, and what happiness felt like, and what contentment felt like, and also what valuing my own opinion over other people's opinions felt like. And just in case you need it, you have my permission to dream as wildly big as you want in your fantasy world life, right? You can give yourself permission to do that. It's okay. And you can say it out loud. But all right, so once I learned how to dream, I started giving myself permission to make decisions on my own, like very selfishly. And here's the thing about being selfish in this way is I got to make decisions that I felt were best for me, that I felt were best for me. And this allowed me to explore what I actually wanted without other people's opinions getting in the way. And I got to know my own desires and my own dreams and my own boundaries. And I got to know myself on a level that I never thought was possible because I paid attention to what my brain was coming up with when I allowed myself to dream. And I started making decisions based off of that, right? I started to learn what I like and what I don't like. And I let myself experiment and explore and make mistakes and change my mind. You have permission to change your mind whenever you want, right? And starting to know myself, I made decisions based on the because I want to rationale and only because I want to for some things, right? There was a post that I came across recently that I reposted on my personal page, that not every decision you have to make is important. Some of it is just for theatrical value or cinematic value. And I loved it. Like you can make decisions just because you think they'd be fun, right? And just in case you need it, you have my permission and you can give yourself permission to make decisions based on what you think is best for you and just because you want to for cinematic value. So when I started making decisions just because I want to, I started feeling like myself, like genuinely feeling like myself for the first time in my life. Like I started understanding who I was and how I operated and how my brain worked. And I started getting comfortable with my own mind and I started showing up as me, or at least the version of me that I think is the most authentic I've been in my life. And you know how freaking scary that is? People start to notice. And that brings me to the next thing that I gave myself permission to do. And that is caring less about what everyone else thinks. Now, I still value other people's opinions and I consider the merits of what they say, but I am the wildly eccentric CEO of my own life and I'm running this company and I get the final say in absolutely everything, right? Because I'm the boss. And I don't want anybody else to have that sort of control without my permission, right? And here's a list of things. I came up with a short list of things that I wouldn't have done if I had listened to other people's opinions, or, you know, maybe they didn't give me those opinions. Maybe there's not very many people who think this, but here's what I thought other people's opinions would be, or like, not, that's not what I'm going for. But if I had made decisions based on what I thought other people were thinking, I wouldn't have done any of these things. That's what I'm getting at. All right. So I wouldn't have learned about food and how it is literally used to build and maintain every cell in your body, and learned about how intricately connected all of it is. I would not have learned about stress and anxiety and how to tame it all without changing anything in my life. I would not have learned to feel and process emotions and not resist the negative feelings that happen simply because I'm a human being and that's what happens. I would never have started a TikTok that has reached millions of people with information that helps them feel better in their bodies. I would not have left the confines of a career that I spent a ton of time and money in school to have, right? I would not have left a soul sucking job to work part time and be around people that I love to be around. I would not have started my own coaching business and helped people through the very real anxiety that they've held on to for decades. I would not have taken Reiki classes and become a Reiki master. I would not have explored human design and how it can help people better manage their energy and shared about it, because that was a huge thing that I was very scared about other people's opinions on, because I was a medical person and who does all this weird, human design stuff. Like that's crazy, right? I never would have started a podcast where I talk to all of you about the things that I think mean something. I never would have spent time relaxing without feeling guilty about it, because I had this idea that in order to be a productive member of society, I needed to go, 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 go all the time. And resting meant you were lazy and all this, that like, I just want to lay down and enjoy this, couple of hours on a Saturday, right? Like, or literally you can do that every day if you want to. There, you don't have to have guilt about that. I had a lot of guilt hanging on around that, and working through that, giving myself permission to just relax and rest without feeling guilt was so huge in my life. I would never have gone skiing. I would never have gone skydiving. I would never have made plans with friends that actually never included any plans, but did include a lot of laughter and Googling random things in the city and driving and seeing them, right? I never would have cut my hair short. I never would have stopped reading books partway through because they just kind of suck, because I had this idea that once you start a book, you have to finish it. Like, no, I don't have time for that. I'm just not going to do that anymore. I'm just going to delete it from my life and just never look back, right? You'd be surprised how many people think that you have to finish books. Anyway, who knows what else I will get up to and what decisions I'll make just because I want to, and because I don't really care what other people have to say about them, because I think they'll be fun, right? And I still go through phases of paralysis in my growth, especially when I take a turn and focus on other things and then try to refocus on what I'm doing. But along the way, I sometimes forget about how much of a badass I am. And I'm sure that happens to many of you as well. And I start to revert back to relying on other people's opinions. And I think that's a pretty normal phase to go through, like over and over again. And it kind of sucks every time. But it also brings me to a slightly different point in the permission giving aspects. You have permission to not to not be okay if you're not okay. And you have permission to celebrate yourself even before you think you deserve it, or before other people think you deserve it, or before you've met your goal. And I would actively encourage that. You have permission to be kind to yourself no matter what. You have permission to not be good at things and to do them anyway, and to outright fail at them over and over again if you want to. You have permission to keep going and trying in different ways and never give up. And you have permission to stop whenever you want, just because you like your reasons to. You have permission to live whatever version of life you want to live. And I think it's really important that you do exactly that, because we need more people in the world to give themselves permission to live their own authentic lives and bring light and love and weirdness into the world in their own very unique sort of ways. And it can all start with you. Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. Many of you will be able to take the ideas that you've heard and apply them in your daily life, and that's really all you need. That's amazing. But for those of you who could use a little one-on-one help with how to make these things actually work for you in your real life, please reach out. The link to schedule a consult with me is in the show notes. You don't have to do this alone. See you soon.